The wooden fingers tapped against my bedroom window at exactly 3:17 a.m., the same time for 3 nights in a row. At first, I thought it was tree branches in the wind, but when I pulled back the curtains tonight, I saw them clearly elongated. Wooden digits with splintered tips, retracting quickly into the darkness. I could have sworn I heard a childish giggle fade into the night dawn. My name is Mason. And until last week, I was the head of prop design for a small independent film studio, specializing in horror movies. Our latest project was a dark reimagining of the classic Pinocchio tale, not the charming Disney version, but something closer to the original Italian story, with all its inherent darkness and moral warnings. We were on a tight budget as usual, so I decided to build the Pinocchio puppet myself rather than commissioning it from our usual specialist. Looking back now, I realized that was where everything started to go wrong. I live alone in a small craftsman-style house that I inherited from my grandfather. It sits at the end of a quiet street, partially obscured by ancient oak trees that have grown too large for the modest yard. The house's character, as realtors like to say, sloping hardwood floors, a stone fireplace that smokes too much to be useful, and windows that never seem to fully close regardless of how many times I've tried to fix them. My workshop is in what used to be the garage, connected to the house by a narrow hallway that always feels colder than the rest of the home. The walls are lined with tools, materials, and props from previous productions, masks with exaggerated expressions, partially dismembered mannequins, and various implements designed to look bloodied and cruel on camera. It's a space that even my film crew friends find unsettling, but to me, it had always been simply functional until I brought the wood home. I sourced the pine for the Pinocchio puppet from an estate sale of an old woodcarver who had recently passed away. His daughter was selling his materials and mentioned that her father had been particularly protective of certain pieces of wood, claiming they had personality. I'd laugh at the time. Many craftsmen develop sentimental attachments to their materials. I selected a piece that seemed particularly well-aged. The grain was tight and even, with a color that suggested it might be quite old. The old man's daughter hesitated when I chose it, but didn't refuse to sell it to me. Carving the puppet was strangely easy. I usually plan my designs meticulously, but with Pinocchio, my hands seemed to know what to do without conscious direction. The wood yielded to my tools as if it wanted to take the form I was creating. In just 3 days, I had a fully articulated puppet, about 3 feet tall, with joints that moved with unsettling smoothness. Its face took shape with minimal effort, large eyes with pupils that somehow seemed deeper than I'd intended, a pointed nose that had a perfect curve, and a mouth that, depending on the angle, either smiled innocently or smirked with knowing malice. The director was ecstatic when I brought it to the studio. "It looks alive," he'd said, handling it with reverent care. Exactly what I wanted. Something that exists in the uncanny valley, almost human, but not quite. The puppet was an immediate hit with the crew, though some of the actors mentioned feeling uneasy when near it. Our lead actress, who played the role of a modern version of the Blue Fairy, refused to touch it after her first scene, claiming it had squeezed her hand when the cameras weren't rolling. We'd all laughed it off as method acting. Filming went remarkably well. The movie, titled Splinters, was coming together better than any of our previous projects. The only odd thing was that we seemed to need fewer and fewer takes when the puppet was on screen. It was as if it knew exactly what the director wanted, moving with subtle perfection, even though I was operating it from offset. By the final day of shooting, the director had started speaking to it directly, giving it instructions rather than telling me how to manipulate it. I should have found this strange, but somehow it seemed natural at the time. It wasn't until we wrapped production, and I brought the puppet back to my workshop, that things began to feel wrong. The first night, I placed it on my workbench, intending to make some repairs to its left arm, which had been slightly damaged during the final scene. I fell asleep at my desk while sketching the repair plan, and when I woke at dawn, the puppet was not where I'd left it. Instead, it was sitting on a shelf across the room, legs dangling over the edge as if it had climbed up and seated itself there. I assumed I must have moved it before falling asleep and forgotten, though I had no recollection of doing so. The second night, I locked the workshop door before going to bed, leaving the puppet laid out on the bench with its arm disassembled. For repair, I slept poorly, troubled by dreams of wooden footsteps echoing through my house. When morning came, I went to the workshop to find the door still locked, but the puppet was no longer on the bench. After a frantic search, I discovered it sitting in my living room armchair, its damaged arm now fully repaired. I told myself there must be a logical explanation. Perhaps I'd completed the repair while half asleep, a sort of crafting sleepwalking. It wouldn't be the first time I'd worked through the night without forming clear memories. Deadlines had pushed me to similar states of exhaustion before. But the repair work was impeccable. Better than I could have done even when fully alert. The damaged joint now moved with silent precision, the wood seamlessly matched. That evening, I called the director to ask if he'd come by and picked up the puppet for additional shots. He denied it, sounding confused by my question. When I explained about the movement and the repair, he laughed nervously and suggested I was overworking myself. "Maybe you've been watching too many dailies," he said. "That puppet is creepy as hell on screen. I'm not surprised it's getting to you." Before hanging up, he added, "Just don't let anything happen to it. The test audiences are loving the footage. It might be our breakthrough film." After the call, I decided to secure the puppet more thoroughly. I placed it in a large trunk used for storing delicate props, closed the heavy lid, and for good measure, placed a padlock on it. I then took a sleeping pill to ensure I wouldn't sleepwalk and went to bed early. But the wooden fingers tapping on my window woke me at exactly 3:17 a.m. And now I'm sitting in bed, staring at my bedroom door, listening to what sounds like light. Wooden footsteps making their way down the hallway toward my room. The footsteps have stopped just outside my door. I can see a shadow in the sliver of light beneath it, something small, child-sized but with proportions that aren't quite right. I've pulled the covers up as if they could offer some protection, my phone clutched in my hand as I type this, hoping that documenting what's happening will somehow make it less terrifying, or at least leave some record if things go badly. The doorknob is turning slowly now, though I know I locked it before getting into bed. There's a gentle creaking sound, not from the door, but what sounds like wood flexing and stretching. Something is pushing against the door, applying steady pressure that the lock won't withstand for long. I can hear a soft whispering through the wood. It sounds like a child's voice, but with a strange, hollow quality to it. "Father," it whispers, "why did you lock me away? Don't you want me to be a real boy?" In the days that followed that terrifying night, I found myself trapped in what felt like a waking nightmare. The puppet, I still can't bring myself to call it by name, didn't break down my bedroom door as I had feared. Instead, when the first light of dawn filtered through my curtains, the pressure against the door ceased and the whispering fell silent. I waited another hour before finding the courage to open the door, expecting to find the wooden figure waiting in the hallway. There was nothing there. With cautious steps, I made my way to the workshop, treading what I might find. The trunk was exactly as I had left it, padlock still secured. My hands trembled as I unlocked it and lifted the heavy lid. Inside, the puppet lay motionless, arranged exactly as I had placed it the night before. This should have brought me relief, but instead, a cold dread settled in my stomach. If the puppet hadn't moved, what had been outside my door? What had whispered through the wood? And what had tapped on my window with wooden fingers? I spent the morning examining the puppet meticulously, looking for any sign that it had moved splinters on its fingers, scuff marks on its joints, anything to confirm or deny my fears. It remained pristine, its wooden face frozen in that ambiguous expression between innocence and malice. Its eyes, though painted, seemed to follow me as I moved around the workshop. Twice I could have sworn I saw them blink, but when I looked directly at them, they were as still and lifeless as one would expect from a wooden puppet, unable to face another night alone with the thing. I called Maria, one of our set designers and a close friend. Without telling her the full extent of my fears, I didn't want her to think I was losing my mind. I invited her over for dinner and a review of the production designs for our next project. To my relief, she agreed, and her presence that evening brought a much-needed sense of normalcy to the house. "You seem on edge," Maria observed as we sat in the living room after dinner, sketches spread across the coffee table between us. "Is everything okay with the Pinocchio film? Last I heard, the director was over the moon about it. I hesitated before responding, unsure how much to share. "The film's fine. It's just, have you ever created something that felt like it took on a life of its own?" Maria laughed. "That's the dream, isn't it? To make something so real, it seems alive." She picked up her wine glass, swirling the deep red liquid thoughtfully. "The puppet you made. It's really something special. Mason, there's a scene where it turns to look directly at the camera, and I swear it sent chills down my spine when we watched the dailies. Where are you keeping it, anyway? I'd love to see it up close." Before I could answer, a loud thud came from the direction of my workshop. Maria jumped, spilling a few drops of wine on her sleeve. "What was that?" "Probably just some tools settling," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the rapid pounding of my heart. "The house makes all kinds of noises, especially in the evening." Maria seemed to accept this explanation, but I noticed her eyes darting toward the hallway that led to the workshop. We tried to return to our discussion of the production designs, but the easy flow of conversation had been disrupted. Every creak of the old house now seemed ominous, loaded with potential meaning. When Maria left around midnight, I found myself standing in the middle of my living room, paralyzed by the thought of checking the workshop. Part of me wanted to grab my car keys and drive to a hotel for the night. Another part, the rational, logical part, that still clung to the belief that there must be a sensible explanation for everything, urged me to confront my fears directly. It took 3 glasses of whiskey before I found the courage to walk down the hallway to the workshop. The door was closed, though I couldn't remember if I'd left it that way. My hand shook as I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The workshop was dark, except for a shaft of moonlight coming through the small window near the ceiling. In that silver-blue illumination, I could see the trunk in the center of the room. Its lid was open, though I was certain I had closed and locked it before Maria arrived. But what turned my blood to ice was not the open trunk. It was the small figure sitting on my workbench, legs swinging casually, head tilted as if in curiosity. "Hello, Father," it said in that hollow, childish voice I had heard through my bedroom door. I was beginning to think he'd never come to see me. I fumbled for the light switch, my fingers numb with terror. When the fluorescent lights flickered on, the puppet was indeed sitting on the workbench, but it was as still and lifeless as it should be. There was no movement, no voice, just a wooden figure positioned in a way I had not left it. I approached slowly, half expecting it to spring to life at any moment. Up close, I noticed something that made my skin crawl, a small red stain on its wooden fingertips, still wet and shimmering under the harsh lights. I looked down at my own hand and saw a small cut on my index finger, oozing blood. I had no recollection of injuring myself. With trembling hands, I picked up the puppet, intending to lock it back in the trunk. As I lifted it, I could have sworn I felt it adjust its weight in my hands. subtly shifting to make itself easier to carry. Its head rolled against my arm in a movement too natural, too deliberate to be the result of gravity or momentum. I nearly dropped it in shock, but managed to place it back in the trunk. This time, I not only locked the padlock, but wrapped the entire trunk in chains from my prop collection, securing them with multiple locks. Excessive, perhaps, but I needed to be certain it couldn't get out. As I worked, I felt eyes on me. Not just the painted eyes of the puppet, but something else. Something watching from the shadows of my workshop. After securing the trunk, I retreated to the kitchen, where I washed the small cut on my finger and bandaged it. I made a strong cup of coffee, determined to stay awake through the night. As I sat at the kitchen table, my phone chimed with a text message from the director. Just watch the final cut. This film will change everything for us. The puppet is magical on screen. It's like it knows exactly what the audience needs to see. Can't wait for you to watch it. I stared at the message, a new thought forming in my mind. What if the puppet wasn't moving on its own? What if something else was moving at something that wanted the film to be made? The old woodcarver's daughter had said her father believed the wood had personality. What if it was more than that? What if there was something inside the wood? As these thoughts swirled in my mind, the lights in the kitchen flickered briefly. From somewhere in the house came the sound of wood gently scraping against wood. And then, cutting through the silence of the night, the distinct sound of a child's laughter, but hollow, empty, like it was coming from a space where lungs and vocal cords should be, but weren't. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my kitchen until dawn, listening to the occasional sounds of movement from different parts of the house, soft tapping, gentle creaking, what sounded like small footsteps running quickly across the floor above me. But nothing appeared. Nothing confronted me directly. It was as if whatever was in the house was playing a game, testing boundaries, learning what it could get away with. When morning finally came, I called in sick to work and drove to the local library. I spent hours researching the original Pinocchio story, looking for any clues that might help me understand what was happening. The librarian, an elderly woman with kind eyes, noticed my frantic searching and approached my table. "You seem very interested in Pinocchio," she observed, glancing at the stack of books I had accumulated. "Are you a scholar of folklore?" "No," I admitted. "I'm working on a film adaptation. I need to understand the original story better." She nodded thoughtfully. "The original is much darker than most people realize. Collodi didn't intend it as a children's story, not really. It was a cautionary tale." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You know, there's an even older version of the story before Collodi. In some regions of Italy, they tell of wooden creatures that weren't puppets at all, but something else that took the form of children. They would lure real children away, replacing them with themselves. The parents would raise these wooden beings, never realizing they weren't their true children until it was too late." A chill ran through me. Too late for what? The librarian straightened up, suddenly seeming uncomfortable. "Oh, just old folk tales. Nothing to take seriously. But if you're interested in the original Pinocchio, you should know that in Collodi's first draft, the story ended with the puppet's death, hanged from a tree for his misdeeds. It was only later that he added the redemption and transformation into a real boy." She patted my shoulder. "Much better ending, don't you think? Everyone deserves a chance to become real." As she walked away, her words echoed in my mind. A chance to become real. Was that what the puppet wanted? To become real? And if so, what would that process entail? I left the library with more questions than answers and a growing sense of dread. On the drive home, my phone rang. It was Maria. "Mason, are you okay? You weren't at the production meeting this morning." "I'm not feeling well," I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. I needed a day off. Well, I thought you should know the test screening went incredibly well last night. The audience was mesmerized by the puppet. There were actually gasps when it moved in certain scenes. The director's talking about pushing for a festival run. This could be big for all of us. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. That's great. Anyway, Maria continued, seemingly oblivious to my lack of enthusiasm. I left my notebook at your place last night. Is it okay if I stop by to pick it up? Maybe around 7? The thought of having someone else in the house was comforting. Sure, that would be fine. When I arrived home, I went straight to the workshop to check on the trunk. The chains were still in place, the lock secure. But as I stood there, I noticed something on my workbench: wood shavings, fresh and light in color, scattered across the surface. Next to them lay one of my carving tools, a fine detail knife I used for intricate work. It had been moved from its usual place in my toolbox. I approached cautiously, examining the shavings. They weren't from the pine I had used for the puppet, but from a piece of oak I kept for a different project. What disturbed me most was the pattern they formed, not the random scattering you would expect, but deliberately arranged to form what looked like a childish drawing of a house with two figures standing outside it. One tall, one small dot. As I stared at this unsettling arrangement, a noise from behind made me whirl around. Nothing was there, but the door to the workshop, which I had left open, was now closed. My heart pounding, I quickly left the room, making sure to lock the door. Behind me, in the living room, I found Maria's notebook exactly where she had left it on the coffee table. But next to it was something that hadn't been there before, a small wooden finger, intricately carved and undeniably familiar in its craftsmanship. I picked it up with trembling hands. It was warm to the touch, as if it had recently been held. The doorbell rang, making me jump. I shoved the wooden finger into my pocket and went to answer it, already knowing it would be Maria. But when I opened the door, the porch was empty. The street beyond was quiet, no sign of Maria's car or anyone else. Just as I was about to close the door, I noticed a small piece of paper on the welcome mat. Picking it up, I unfolded it to find a child's drawing in crayon, a blue fairy with wings, surrounded by what looked like wooden children. At the bottom, in crude, shaky letters that nonetheless sent a wave of terror through me, were the words, "Helping me become real." I slammed the door shut and locked it, then checked every window and door in the house to make sure they were secure. As I moved from room to room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something was always just out of sight, moving when I wasn't looking directly at it. By the time Maria actually arrived at 7, I was a nervous wreck. She noticed immediately. "Mason, you look terrible. Are you sure you're just sick? You seem scared." I contemplated telling her everything but couldn't bring myself to do it. Who would believe that a puppet was coming to life, moving around my house, leaving messages? Instead, I simply said, "I haven't been sleeping well. Bad dreams about the film." Maria's expression softened with sympathy. The creative process can be draining, especially with horror. Maybe you need a break from it all. Why don't you come? Stay at my place for a few days? My spare room is tiny, but it's better than being alone if you're not feeling well. The offer was tempting, so tempting that I almost accepted immediately. But then I thought about the puppet. Could I leave it here, unattended? What if it wasn't contained by the chains and locks? What if it followed me to Maria's? Worse, what if it hurt someone while I was gone, knowing I had abandoned it? "Thanks, but I think I just need rest," I said finally. "I'll be fine in a day or two." Maria didn't look convinced, but she didn't press the issue. She collected her notebook and gave me a concerned look before leaving. "Call me if you need anything, okay? Day or night." After she left, the house felt emptier, the silence more oppressive. I made myself dinner, but couldn't eat more than a few bites. As night fell, I found myself checking the workshop door repeatedly, making sure it remained locked. Around 10, I received another text from the director. Just heard from the festival committee. They want to see Splinters as soon as it's ready. For submission. This puppet is going to make us all famous. I turned off my phone after that, not wanting any more reminders of the film or the puppet. I considered leaving the house despite my concerns. Perhaps checking into a hotel for the night. But something kept me there. A sense of responsibility, perhaps. Or simply the fear that whatever was happening would follow me wherever I went. As midnight approached, I settled in the living room with a blanket and the television on for company, though I wasn't really watching it. I must have dozed off briefly because I woke with a start to find the TV showing static, its soft hiss the only sound in the room. And there, reflected in the dark screen, was a small figure standing in the doorway behind me. I didn't turn around. Immediately, my body felt frozen, my breath caught in my throat. In the dim reflection, I could see the puppet's outline. The pointed cap, the slender limbs, the slightly oversized head. It stood perfectly still, as if waiting for me to acknowledge its presence. Slowly, fighting against every instinct that screamed at me to run, I turned to face the doorway. It was empty. There was nothing there. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by doubt. Had I imagined it? Was my exhaustion causing hallucinations? I got up and checked the workshop. Door still locked. The chain-wrapped trunk would be secure inside. Returning to the living room, I decided to stay awake through the night. I made coffee and sat in my armchair, facing the doorway, determined not to let my guard down again. The hours crept by in. Tense silence, broken only by the occasional creaking of the old house, settling at exactly 3:17 a.m. My phone, which I had turned back on to check the time, lit up with a call. The screen showed no caller ID, just an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered it. At first, there was only silence on the line. Then, faintly, I heard it. The sound of wood scraping against wood, followed by that hollow, childlike voice. "Why won't you help me, Father? Don't you want me to be real? The blue fairy can't do it alone. She needs your help too." I ended the call immediately, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. As I sat there in the dark, trying to calm my racing heart, a new sound emerged from somewhere in the house, the soft melodic humming of a lullaby, sung in a woman's voice I didn't recognize. It seemed to be coming from the workshop. With a courage born of desperation, I grabbed a heavy flashlight from the kitchen drawer and made my way to the workshop door. The humming grew louder as I approached, now accompanied by what sounded like gentle whispering. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear what was being said. Soon, a woman's voice crooned. "Soon you'll be a real boy, just like you've always wanted. But remember our agreement. You know what you need to do." "Yes, Fairy," replied the hollow voice of the puppet. "I know exactly what to do." The blood froze in my veins. There were two voices in there, two entities in my locked workshop. My hand shook as I inserted the key into the lock, torn between the need to see what was happening and the fear of what I might find. Before I could turn the key, a sudden silence fell on the other side of the door. Then, directly on the other side, so close I could feel the vibration against the wood, came a light tapping of what could only be wooden fingers. "Father," the childlike voice whispered through the door. "I know you're there. Won't you come in and meet the blue fairy? She's been waiting for you for a very long time." Before I could respond or retreat, the door handle began to turn from the inside. I stumbled backward, watching in horror as the locked door slowly opened, revealing the dark workshop beyond. Standing in the doorway was the puppet, moving smoothly, its wooden joints no longer requiring my manipulation. Its painted face seemed more expressive somehow, its smile wider, its eyes more gleaming. "Come in, Father," it said, gesturing with one wooden hand. "We have so much to discuss about how I can become a real boy. About what I need from you to make it happen." Behind the puppet, in the shadows of the workshop, I caught a glimpse of something tall and slender, a feminine silhouette that seemed to shimmer with a faint blue light. As my eyes struggled to focus on it, the figure raised what looked like a wand, pointing it not at the puppet, but at me. "Don't be afraid," the puppet said, taking a step toward me. "Becoming real is a painful process, but the blue fairy says you won't feel it for long." The next morning found me curled up on my living room floor, having apparently passed out from sheer terror. The workshop door was closed and locked, exactly as I had left it before the nightmarish encounter. Had it all been a dream? A hallucination brought on by stress and lack of sleep? I wanted desperately to believe that, but the small cut on my hand, now somehow deeper and more painful, suggested otherwise. I called the studio and requested a week off, citing a family emergency. The director was understanding, but made me promise to bring the puppet to set when I returned. "We need to do some promotional photography," he explained. "The marketing team has big plans for our little wooden star." After the call, I stood outside the workshop door for nearly an hour, gathering the courage to enter. Finally, cursing my own cowardice, I unlocked it and stepped inside. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the dust particles floating in the air. Everything looked normal, tools in their places, projects exactly where I'd left them. The chain trunk sitting undisturbed in the center of the room. I approached it slowly, half expecting the lid to burst open. With trembling fingers, I checked each lock and chain, finding them all secure. Should I open it? Verify that the puppet was still inside? The thought of seeing that wooden face again, those eyes that seemed to watch me even when inanimate, made my stomach turn. But I needed to know. One by one, I unlocked the padlocks and unwound the chains. With a deep breath, I lifted the heavy lid of the trunk. The puppet lay inside, motionless, in exactly the position I had placed it. Its painted smile seemed to mock me, as if it knew I would doubt myself, doubt my experiences. I slammed the lid shut and relocked everything, fighting the urge to drag the entire trunk into my yard and set it on fire. But something stopped me. Nagging feeling that destroying the puppet wouldn't solve anything, might even make things worse. Whatever was happening, the puppet itself might be just a vessel, a tool for something else. The blue fairy, or whatever had taken that form in my vision or dream, was the real mystery. I spent the day researching folklore about wooden beings coming to life, about malevolent fairies who granted twisted versions of wishes. The information I found was fragmented, contradictory, but one theme emerged consistently: the transfer of life. In many stories, for an inanimate object to become truly alive, something else had to give up its life force. A sacrifice was required. Becoming real is a painful process, but the blue fairy says you won't feel it for long. The puppet's words echoed in my mind. Was it planning to take my life to fuel its transformation? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. By evening, I had formulated a plan. I couldn't destroy the puppet, couldn't leave it unattended, and couldn't seem to contain it effectively. The only option, as far as I could see, was to remove it from my home, to take it somewhere secure until I could figure out a more permanent solution. I packed a bag with essentials and loaded the still chained trunk into my car. As I was about to leave, my phone rang. It was Maria. "Mason, are you okay? I've been worried about you." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just needed some time off. I'm actually heading out of town for a few days. Going to stay at my cousin's cabin by the lake, get some fresh air." "That sounds like a good idea," she said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. The director mentioned you're bringing the puppet back next week for photos. Want me to pick it up from you? Save you the trip back early? No, I said too quickly. I mean, thanks, but I'll bring it myself. It's delicate. After a brief, awkward silence, Maria spoke again, her voice softer. Mason, is there something you're not telling me? About the puppet, I mean. The way you looked when I mentioned it the other night, ... It was like you were terrified of it. I hesitated, torn between the desire to confide in someone and the certainty that she wouldn't believe me. It's complicated, I finally said. I'll explain when I get back, I promise. Right now, I just need to get some distance from everything. We said our goodbyes, and I finished loading the car. Just as I was about to close the trunk lid, I noticed something odd. My bag had shifted position, now pressed up against the chain container holding the puppet. I was certain I hadn't placed it that way. With growing unease, I adjusted the bag and shut the trunk. As I walked around to the driver's side, I noticed a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision. Someone standing near the edge of my property, partially hidden by the large oak tree. I turned quickly, but there was no one there. Just as I was about to dismiss it as my imagination, I spotted something on the tree trunk, a small piece of paper pinned to the bark. Cautiously, I approached and removed the paper. It was another crayon drawing, similar to the one I had found on my doorstep. This one showed a car, recognizably my car, driving along a winding road. In the car were two stick figures, one behind the wheel and one in what appeared to be the trunk, its wooden limbs distinctly jointed like a puppet's. The most disturbing was the blue feminine figure floating above the car. Following it, my hand shaking, I crumpled the drawing and threw it to the ground. I had to leave now, get as far away as possible. I practically ran to my car, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway with more speed than was safe on the quiet residential street. As I drove toward the highway that would take me to my cousin's cabin, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a blue glow following me. The roads were nearly empty at this hour, just the occasional truck or late-night traveler passing in the opposite direction. Rain had started to fall, a gentle patter that quickly became a downpour, reducing visibility and forcing me to slow down. About an hour into the journey, as I navigated a particularly winding stretch of road that cut through dense forest, my headlights caught something in the middle of the road ahead, a small figure, child-sized, standing perfectly still despite the pouring rain. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding slightly on the wet asphalt. When the car came to a stop, the road ahead was empty. There was no child, no figure of any kind, just the rain falling in sheets, illuminated by my headlights. My heart pounding, I sat there for a long moment, trying to convince myself it had been an animal, perhaps a deer that had bounded away into the woods. Just as I was about to continue driving, a loud thump came from the trunk of the car. I froze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Another thump followed, then another, like something inside was trying to get out. No, I whispered to myself. It's secure. It can't get out. But the thumping continued, growing more insistent, more rhythmic. It almost sounded like knocking, like someone politely requesting to be let out. Unable to continue driving with that sound, I pulled over to the side of the road and shut off the engine. The thumping stopped immediately, leaving only the sound of rain hammering on the roof of the car. I sat in silence, watching the rearview mirror, the side mirrors, scanning the dark forest beyond the reach of my headlights. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes, my phone chimed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. We know where you're going, Father. The Blue Fairy can find you anywhere. But we're already with you, so there's no need to run. Let me out of this box. Let me sit with you. We can talk about how to make me real. It doesn't have to hurt as much as the others. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. The others? Had there been others before me? Other fathers who had carved puppets from that old man's wood? The thought made me dizzy with horror. Another text arrived. Let me show you what I can already do. The blue fairy has taught me so much. As if responding to the message, my car's radio suddenly turned on by itself, cycling through stations at a frantic pace before settling on static. Through the white noise, I could hear a child's voice singing softly, a lullaby in Italian that somehow seemed familiar, though I'd never learned the language. I tried to turn off the radio, but the button had no effect. The singing continued, growing louder, more insistent. The static began to form patterns, pulsing in rhythm with the song. And then, visible in the dark windshield, a reflection appeared, not my own, but the wooden face of the puppet, its features more human-like. Then I remembered carving them. In a panic, I threw open the car door and stumbled out into the rain. The singing stopped immediately, but as I stood there, getting soaked, another sound reached my ears, the sound of wood tapping against metal. It was coming from the trunk. With water streaming down my face, I made a decision. I couldn't keep running. Whatever this thing was, whatever it wanted from me, I needed to confront it directly. I walked to the back of the car and, with trembling hands, opened the trunk. The chains around the wooden box were unraveled. The padlocks open. The padlocks open. The count, the trunk, the wooden box were unraveled. The padlocks open. Lid was still closed, but as I watched, it slowly began to rise. A small wooden hand emerged, fingers flexing with impossible dexterity, followed by an arm, a shoulder, and finally the puppet's head, its painted face, now somehow more expressive, more alive. "Hello, Father," it said, its wooden lips moving, in perfect synchronization with the words. "Thank you for stopping. The blue fairy said you would eventually. What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the pounding rain. The puppet climbed out of the box with fluid grace, its movements no longer stiff or mechanical. It sat on the edge of the trunk, legs dangling, head tilted in a gesture that would have been endearing in a real child, but was deeply unsettling coming from this wooden creation. "I want what any child wants," it said. "To be real, to be alive, to feel and taste and grow and live." It extended one wooden hand toward me, palm up. "And you can help me. You made me. You gave me this form. Now you can give me life." "How?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer, already understood the horrifying exchange it was proposing. The puppet smiled, its painted teeth gleaming in the dim light. "A transfer. The blue fairy can move life from one vessel to another. It's been done before, many times. The old woodcarver, he knew. He protected the wood, kept it safe. But his daughter didn't understand. She let you take it, let you carve." It looked down at its wooden hands, flexing the fingers. "I'm nearly perfect. Your craftsmanship is excellent. I just need the final piece, the spark of life that only a willing creator can provide." "Willing?" I repeated. "I'm not willing. To die so you can live. Live." The puppet's expression shifted to one of disappointment. "It doesn't have to be death, Father. Just a piece of your life force. You would be diminished, but still alive. We could even share your body for a time, until I learn how to fully inhabit this form." It gestured to itself. The others didn't understand. They fought, tried to destroy their creations. It never ends well when that happens. As it spoke, I became aware of a faint blue glow emanating from the forest beyond the road. A tall, slender figure was moving between the trees, coming closer. The blue fairy, or whatever entity had taken that form, in my mind. "She's coming," the puppet said, noticing my gaze. "She'll help us complete the transfer. All you have to do is agree. Say you want to help me become real. That's all it takes to begin." The blue glow was getting brighter, closer. I could now make out the silhouette, a woman's form, but too tall, too thin to be human, moving with a gliding motion as if her feet weren't touching the ground. In that moment, with rain soaking through my clothes and the puppet watching me with those painted eyes that somehow held emotion, I made my decision. I lunged forward, grabbing the wooden figure before it could react. It was surprisingly heavy, its wood dense and solid in my hands. "Father, no," it cried, its voice shifting from childlike to something older, angrier. "You don't understand what you're doing." I didn't respond. Instead, I ran toward the edge of the road, toward the steep embankment that led down to the river I knew flowed alongside this stretch of highway. The puppet struggled in my grasp, its wooden limbs flailing with unexpected strength, scratching my arms and face. "The blue fairy won't let you do this," it shrieked. "She needs me. She's been waiting for me for centuries." The blue glow was moving, faster now, racing toward us through the trees. I could feel cold pressure building in the air, like the moment before lightning strikes. With a final burst of desperate energy, I reached the guardrail and threw myself over it. The puppet still clutched in my arms. We tumbled down the steep, muddy slope, the puppet's screams mixing with my own as we fell. The impact with the swollen river knocked the breath from my lungs. The cold water enveloped us, the current immediately pulling us downstream. In the darkness and confusion, I felt the puppet's hands around my throat, squeezing with inhuman strength. "If I can't have your life willingly," it hissed, its voice somehow clear even underwater, "I'll take it by force. The blue fairy will understand." I fought against it, trying to pry those wooden fingers from my neck while simultaneously struggling to reach the surface. My lungs burned, my vision beginning to darken at the edges. Above us, visible through the churning water, a blue light followed along the riverbank, keeping pace with our desperate struggle. With the last of my strength, I managed to break the puppet's grip and push it away from me. The current caught it immediately, pulling it deeper, its wooden limbs thrashing as it was swept away. I clawed my way to the surface, gasping for air, and managed to grab onto an overhanging branch near the shore. As I hung there, struggling to pull myself to safety, I saw it, the puppet being carried downstream, its painted eyes still somehow fixed on me. And above it, floating over the water, the blue figure watched with an expressionless face that was both beautiful and terrifying. The blue fairy raised her wand, pointing it not at the puppet but at me. "This isn't over," the puppet called, its voice carrying clearly over the rush of the river. "Wood doesn't die in the water, Father. It only changes. And I know where to find you now. I'll always know." The last I saw of it was one small wooden hand reaching up from the water, fingers spread as if in supplication or warning, before the current pulled it around a bend and out of sight. The blue fairy lingered a moment longer, her gaze holding mine. Then she turned and followed the path of the river, the glow fading until it disappeared into the darkness. I don't remember how I made it back to my car. The next clear memory I have is sitting in the driver's seat, soaking wet and shivering as dawn broke over the forest. My phone was dead, my body covered in scratches and bruises. But I was alive. I drove to my cousin's cabin as planned and spent a week there, jumping at every sound, checking and rechecking the locks on doors and windows. I told no one what had happened. Who would believe me? Even now, writing this down, it seems like the product of an exhausted, stressed mind, a breakdown brought on by overwork and isolation. But then I received a call from the director, frantic and confused. "Where's the puppet?" he demanded. "We need it for the promotional photos. The whole marketing campaign is built around it. It's gone," I said simply. "Lost. I can't get it back." "Then make another one," he practically shouted. "The film is incredible, Mason. Test audiences are calling it the most disturbing horror film they've ever seen. But we need the puppet for marketing, for interviews, for the festival circuit. Make another one identical to the first. I refused. I quit the production despite the director's threats of legal action, despite the potential damage to my career. I couldn't risk creating another vessel, another potential home for whatever had tried to take my life in that river. For months afterward, I avoided any news about the film. I moved to a new house in a different city, took a job designing furniture. Nothing creative, nothing that involved carving or sculpture. I tried to forget, to convince myself it had all been a stress-induced hallucination. Then last week, a package arrived at my new address, an address I had shared with only a handful of people, none of whom were connected to my old life in film. Inside was a DVD with no label, no case, just the disc itself with splinters written across it in what looked like a child's handwriting. Against my better judgment, I watched it. The film was exactly as we had shot it, a dark reimagining of the Pinocchio story. Beautifully filmed, genuinely disturbing. But there was something wrong with the puppet. Its movements weren't the ones I had orchestrated during filming. Its expression seemed to change even in scenes where it should have been completely static. And in the final sequence, where the puppet is supposed to remain inanimate, a lifeless prop as the human characters realize the horror of what they've created, it moved. Not dramatically, not in a way that would be obvious to anyone who didn't know exactly how the scene had been shot, but I saw it. A subtle turn of the head toward the camera, a slight curve of the painted mouth that hadn't been there before. And in the very last frame, as the screen fades to black, I swear its eyes blinked. Last night, I woke at exactly 3:17 a.m. to the familiar sound of wooden fingers tapping on my bedroom window. When I gathered the courage to look, there was nothing there, just the rain streaming down the glass, forming patterns that, if you were inclined to see such things, might resemble a child's face. But on the windowsill, placed with deliberate care, was a small wooden finger, expertly carved. Next to it lay a piece of paper with a child's drawing, a house, my new house, with two figures standing outside it. One tall, one small, and above them, watching, a blue figure with a wand. I burned both the finger and the drawing, then packed a bag. I'm leaving tonight, going somewhere remote where I hope it can't find me. But before I go, I needed to write this down, to warn anyone who might find themselves in a similar situation. If you're a creator, a carver, a sculptor, anyone who gives form to lifeless material, be careful what you breathe life into through your art. And if you happen to see splinters at a film festival or streaming service, I urge you not to watch it. The puppet on the screen isn't just a prop, isn't just skillful animation or camera tricks. It's watching from inside the film, learning, growing stronger with each viewing. The blue fairy may have lost one vessel, but she's patient. She's been waiting centuries for the perfect creation to make real. As for me, I know now that I'll never be truly free. Wood doesn't die in water. It only changes. And someday, perhaps years from now, when I've finally convinced myself I'm safe, I'll hear that tapping at my window again. And this time, perhaps, I'll be too tired to run, too worn down to fight. After all, isn't that what every creation ultimately wants? To supplant its creator? To become more real than the hand that formed it? I can almost hear its voice now, wooden lips forming words no puppet should be able to speak. Hello, Father. I'm home.